The command deck of the Galactic Coalition flagship was in chaos. Holograms flickered with catastrophic simulations, numbers streaming in red and yellow, sirens echoing in layered frequencies that made even hardened alien officers twitch. The neutron star below them pulsed with unpredictable gravitational waves, each surge disabling more of the ship's stabilizers. Commands were being shouted in over 20 languages. The reptilian captain hissed through clenched fangs, "Stabilizers offline. We have 4 minutes before structural collapse." The insectoid navigation officer clacked mandibles anxiously. Gravity, well, pull increasing. Calculations show 0 survival probability. Panic rippled through the ranks, even among species long known for their stoic composure. The command deck felt suffocating, filled with dread and the unspoken acceptance of doom. Then the blast doors slid open with a soft hiss, and silence fell like a dropped meteor. Through the door walked Lieutenant Sam Carter. Human, lean frame, slightly ruffled uniform, a travel mug in one hand. He didn't look concerned. He didn't even look surprised. He took one glance at the holographic projections, then casually sipped his coffee. His eyes scanned the room, resting on the panicked reptilian captain, who stared at him with wide, slitted eyes. Sam raised an eyebrow. "What's going on here?" he asked in that easy, almost lazy tone that humans used when they either didn't understand the gravity of a situation or didn't care. The captain hissed. "The neutron star's gravitational flux is pulling us into collapse. There's no trajectory escape vector. We are finished." Sam looked at the swirling chaos of data for a moment, then set his coffee on the nearest console with a gentle clink. He cracked his knuckles and gave that small smirk that had earned humans both awe and terror across known space. Then, slowly, deliberately, he said, "Hold my beer." You could feel the air change. The phrase had circulated through countless whispered stories in the galaxy's back alleys and military mess halls. It was a myth humans carried with them, part joke, part omen. The insectoid officer made a clicking sound that might have been a prayer. Sam slid into the backup console chair and bypassed every security protocol with a few keystrokes that shouldn't have been possible. "Lieutenant Carter, what are you doing?" the captain demanded. "Saving your tail," Sam replied without looking up. His fingers moved fast across the interface. He ignored the complex NAV charts and instead accessed the ship's manual thruster system. "You're thinking like engineers," he muttered. "You gotta think like a bar brawler." The gravitational pull spiked. The ship trembled. Bulkheads groaned. Lights flickered. "If this doesn't work, blame the laws of physics," he added with a wink. He mapped out a daring slingshot maneuver using the neutron star's strongest flux lines. Instead of fighting the gravity well, he planned to let the ship fall deeper into it and then, at the exact moment, ignite the auxiliary thrusters at full burn to catapult them out. It was insane. Reckless. Every simulation screamed it was suicide, but Sam didn't hesitate. His hand hovered over the manual ignition toggle. He turned to the captain. "Trust me." The captain stared. "No." "Good," Sam said, and pressed the switch. The ship lurched forward violently. Alien crew members cried out in terror as the hull groaned louder than before, and warning klaxons screamed at maximum volume. The neutron star's gravitational field tugged them faster and faster, dragging the massive flagship dangerously close to the event horizon. Heat levels spiked. Energy shields flickered and strained. The bridge lights turned blood red. Sam sat calmly, counting down in his head, eyes locked on the flux oscillations. At the precise microsecond, he slammed the secondary thrusters into reverse while redirecting main thrusters on full lateral burn. The ship screamed, metal and quantum lattice grinding under impossible stress. Then, suddenly, silence. The gravitational tug vanished. The ship surged forward, free from the pull, accelerating out of the well with impossible speed. The bridge lights normalized. The alarm silenced. The crew stared at the view screen, showing the neutron star receding behind them, peaceful once again. They were safe. Sam reached for his coffee, now lukewarm, and took another sip. The captain, still frozen in disbelief, finally spoke. "You defied physics." "Nah," Sam said with a grin. "Just dance with it." The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then slowly, one by one, alien officers turned towards Sam with expressions of awe and fear. The legend of Hold My Beer had just become terrifyingly real. The sprawling engineering bay of the alien dreadnought crackled with tension. Blue-white energy arced across malfunctioning conduits as terrified engineers from half a dozen species scrambled to stabilize the failing core. Overheated, coolant hissed from fractured pipes, filling the air with a metallic tang. Massive warning holograms blinked above. Core instability at 92%. Collapse imminent. Frantic calls echoed in a dozen alien languages, overlapping into a cacophony of fear. Then, amidst the chaos, a human figure stepped through the smoke, Specialist Tasha Ward. Hair tied back in a messy bun, grease on her face, sleeves rolled up, and a bottle of Terran root beer clutched in one hand. The lead engineer, a towering insectoid with glistening black mandibles, spun toward her with frantic clicks. Containment breach inevitable. The ship will detonate in minutes. Evacuate now. Tasha took a slow sip of her root beer and shrugged. That's one way to look at it, she said, eyeing the sparking reactor core through the energy shields. The reactor pulsed erratically, humming with a rising frequency that vibrated through the floor. The alien engineers shrank back. A fissure split the energy field. Time was almost out. Tasha set the bottle down carefully on a console and rolled her shoulders. Hold my beer. Gasps rippled through the engineering team. The phrase had become infamous across Coalition space, synonymous with human insanity and impossible victories. She strode toward the core controls, ignoring the alarms and the blistering heat. Human, the insectoid engineer chittered desperately. That containment array is quantum-locked. No one can override it in time. Good thing I'm not no one, she muttered, pulling a laser torch from her tool belt. She flicked it on with a snap hiss and started cutting into the manual override panel. Sparks showered across her boots, but she didn't flinch. The deck beneath her trembled violently as the core hit 95%. Her hands moved fast, slicing through armored casing, yanking out fried components, and cross-wiring alien circuits with improvised connectors she crafted from human chewing gum and spare alloy strips. She muttered to herself, who designs a fail-safe that doesn't fail safe? Aliens, that's who. Sweat trickled down her temple, but her eyes stayed laser-focused. The countdown clock flashed to 2 minutes. The insectoid engineer fluttered in panic. You cannot possibly. Tasha slammed the panel shut with a bang. Watch me. She spun to the adjacent console and began inputting override commands, her fingers dancing across alien glyphs like she'd grown up reading them. Static crackled in the air as the core's oscillations reached an ear-splitting pitch. The ground shifted violently, throwing several alien engineers off their feet. Tasha held on, typing faster, her brow furrowed in intense concentration. She keyed in a command sequence that hadn't existed moments before, a wild improvisation between human logic and alien design. The insectoid gasped. You're rerouting the core into a phased energy loop. That's suicidal. Only if you're bad at math, she quipped without looking up. Her hand hovered over the execution key. She glanced back at the terrified engineering crew. Might want a duck. She pressed the button. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then a deep bass tremor rippled through the deck plates. The core's blinding energy pulse surged into the containment array, collapsed, and rebounded into the phased loop Tasha had cobbled together. Energy flared through the conduits, violently stabilizing. The deck plates stopped vibrating. The alarm klaxons fell silent. The countdown froze at 99%. Then, impossibly, it reversed, dropping back to safe levels. The reactor hummed softly, balanced and stable, as if it hadn't been seconds from catastrophic meltdown. The room fell dead silent. The insectoid engineer gaped, antennae trembling. Tasha wiped sweat from her brow with her sleeve and sauntered back toward her forgotten bottle of root beer. She took a victorious swig and exhaled. Crisis averted. The insectoid engineer finally found his voice. You rewrote quantum containment protocols on the fly with chewing gum. Tasha winked. And a little hope. The engineering crew slowly erupted into cheers, wings buzzing, tendrils waving, and exoskeletons clicking in disbelief and relief. Tasha gave them a 2-finger salute, grabbed her bottle, and strolled toward the exit as if she hadn't just performed the impossible. Behind her, hushed voices spread the words across the engineering bay. The human had said the phrase. She had lived the myth. Hold My Beer would now carry yet another legend among the coalition, a tale of reckless ingenuity, sheer nerve, and defiance in the face of certain doom. The desolate landscape of Dirac 4's atmosphere-choked surface was a storm-racked wasteland. Dark crimson clouds churned with electric fury overhead, casting jagged shadows across sharp, black rock formations. Amidst the swirling chaos, towering war mech slumbered forward, massive alien constructs of armor and weaponry, each one bristling with plasma cannons and seismic blasters. The alien commanders, safe inside their shielded carriers high above, watched as their machines advanced on the small human forward camp, little more than a cluster of reinforced modules and hastily assembled defenses. Inside the camp, alarms blared, and dust filled the air as tremors shook the ground with every advancing mech step. Commander Juno Keats stood on the command deck, eyes narrowed at the tactical display. The readouts were bleak. No backup, no orbital support, and 6 enemy Titans approaching. Her team was already scrambling to prepare the last-ditch defenses. The room smelled of stress and burning circuits. Private Ortiz rushed in, panic on his face. "Commander, they're 30 seconds out. Shields won't hold." Juno exhaled slowly, then turned as the blast doors hissed open and a figure strolled in, not with panic, but with casual confidence. Sergeant Will Kade, wearing scuffed armor, grease on his face, and a half-empty can of Terran beer in his hand. He nodded to the group. "Heard we've got a little mech problem." Ortiz gawked. "Sir, we are way beyond problem." Will took a sip, sighed contentedly, and set the can down. "Hold my beer." Everyone in the command center froze. The words dropped like a heavy stone in a still pond. Even Ortiz stopped mid-sentence. Juno's eyebrows rose in disbelief. "You're not serious?" Will just grinned, slinging a tool pack over his shoulder. He stepped toward the armory wall, popping open a concealed panel. Inside was a human prototype suit, the Mjolnir II, a mechanized exoframe designed for close-quarters anti-armor combat. The project had been shelved after being deemed too unstable for field deployment. No one had dared power it up since testing. Will shrugged into the frame, locking in with practiced ease. Sparks flickered as systems roared to life. The camp's lights dimmed momentarily as the suit drew power from the auxiliary grid. Red warning symbols flashed across the display, but Will didn't hesitate. "Let's dance." The room watched, silent and stunned, as he stepped out into the storm. Thunder roared overhead. Across the rocky ridge, the alien mechs crested the horizon, each one casting shadows that swallowed the human camp whole. Plasma cannons charged with shrill whines, aiming directly at the last human stand. Will boosted forward with a seismic thud, his exoframe's jets propelling him into the air. Wind tore at him, lightning crackled across the skies, and the mechs locked onto him as their primary target. Massive cannons fired in sync, and explosions tore through the jagged terrain. But Will was faster. He rolled midair, boosting sideways, narrowly dodging blasts that could vaporize a shuttle. He landed on the first mech's shoulder with crushing force, the impact denting alien alloy. Before the machine could react, Will jammed a plasma charge into its vent system. He kicked off, spiraling through the air as the mech exploded from within, showering the field in fire and twisted metal. The other mechs hesitated for just a moment, a fatal pause. Will hit the ground running, exoframe servos screaming, dodging cannon fire with impossible reflexes. He closed the distance to the second mech, leaping onto its cockpit casing. With brute force, he ripped open the hatch, exposing the panicked alien pilot. Will gave him a short salute before tossing in a microfusion grenade. He jumped clear as the mech detonated in a dazzling sphere of fire. The alien commanders in orbit began issuing frantic orders. Their calm, calculated assault turned to confusion and desperation. Back at the camp, the human crew watched the live feed in stunned silence. Ortiz's jaw hung open. He's taking them apart. Juno could only shake her head, a mixture of disbelief and admiration in her eyes. That crazy bastard might actually win. The third and fourth mechs fell in quick succession, one disabled by a precision blast to its knee joint, sending it crashing into the fourth. Will planted a charge that took them both out in a brilliant inferno. The fifth mech tried to retreat, but Will wasn't having it. Boosting off a rock face, he soared onto its back, punching through armor plating with enhanced fists, disabling its power core. Only one remained. It turned, its pilots likely praying to alien gods, but Will was already in midair. He landed with an earth-shaking impact, tearing into the mech's weapon mount and driving it into the ground. When the dust finally settled, Will Kade stood alone on a field of smoldering wreckage. The alien commanders recalled their remaining forces, their fear now palpable. Humans didn't retreat. They didn't fold under impossible odds. Sometimes they simply said, "Hold my beer," and the galaxy learned to tremble. The alien war council chamber was silent, save for the faint hum of atmospheric generators and the low flicker of blue holographic displays. The towering Vrex Dominion's high commanders sat in elevated thrones of obsidian and luminescent crystal, their reptilian eyes narrowed, mandibles twitching with agitation. Before them floated the enormous projection of the human soldier, Sergeant Will Kade, standing atop the broken remains of their finest war mechs, battered but alive, defiant against impossible odds. His voice from the intercepted battlefield recording echoed in the chamber. "Hold my beer." The phrase had become infamous. Commander Ril Zen broke the silence, her voice strained. "We underestimated them. We thought them fragile, predictable. But that was chaos incarnate." Grand Strategist Rolneth slowly turned his gaze toward the lower tier where intelligence officers shuffled uneasily. "Explain how one unaugmented human with experimental technology dismantled 6 Prime War Titans." An intelligence aide trembled and offered weakly. They are driven by an irrational defiance, Supreme One. They disregard logic. They do not retreat when logic commands surrender. They adapt unpredictably. Their culture celebrates recklessness as valor." The chamber rippled with low hisses of concern. Screens now replayed footage of other human encounters. A pilot ejecting from a failing ship only to land on an enemy hull and disable it from the outside. A scientist sabotaging an entire weapons depot using only a pressure valve and chewing gum. Miners on a remote colony fighting off superior forces with nothing but industrial equipment and sheer willpower. Over and over, the impossible became reality. And each instance carried the same strange pattern, spontaneous decisions born of madness that somehow worked. Why did we not foresee this? Rolneth snarled, claws tapping on his armrest. Rilzen answered with a reluctant bow of her scaled head. Because they don't operate within patterns. Their courage is untempered by caution. Their ingenuity flourishes in chaos. They are a species whose instinct seems to say, if it's insane, it just might work. There was a pause as the senior war council absorbed the bitter truth. Suddenly, the chamber's gravity shifted slightly as the High Arbiter descended from his platform, his ornate armor refracting shimmering light. His voice rumbled through the hall. "Enough debate. The question before us, do we escalate conflict or do we concede?" The word concede was almost sacrilegious in this chamber. For cycles uncounted, the Vrex Dominion had subjugated countless species. Their war engines were unstoppable. Their strategies flawless. But these humans, they didn't follow rules. They didn't fear death the same way. And worse, their actions inspired fear in those who had never known it. The chamber fell into deep discussion, voices rising, arguing in ancient dialects. At that moment, the great holographic projection shimmered and shifted to a new transmission. A shaky feed from a border skirmish showed another human force outnumbered and outgunned. One soldier, pinned down, turned to his squad mate, handed over his drink, and said the same cursed phrase, "Hold my beer." He then charged an enemy position armed with nothing but an empty rifle casing filled with explosive powder and a jury-rigged detonator. It worked. The War Council went silent once more. Rolneth's voice dropped to a near whisper. They weaponized madness. An unexpected, chilling fear seeped through the room. If one human could inspire such terror, what of a battalion? What of an entire civilization built on that wild defiance? The High Arbiter finally spoke. "We are not fighting an enemy. We are fighting the embodiment of chaos given purpose. Every strategy they counter with improvisation. Every advantage they answer with insanity. We have weapons. They have willpower untethered by reason." Rolneth slowly turned back to the gathering. His next words were ancient and rare. "I call for retreat. Gasps echoed in the hall. A retreat? From an inferior species? Rilzen clenched her hands but nodded slowly. It is the only logical course of action. Continue this war, and our tactical superiority will become meaningless. We cannot predict them, and our soldiers are beginning to fear them. The council chambers pulsed with confirmation signals as senior members solemnly agreed. The final command was transmitted across the Dominion. Cease all hostilities against humanity. Acknowledge the ceasefire. Open diplomatic channels. The great fleets of the Rex Dominion slowly reversed course, their dreadnoughts turning away from human colonies, their war banners lowered. Back on the human frontier outpost, the battered survivors watched in awe as alien warships pulled back, their aggression evaporating. Commander Juno Keats sat beside Will Kade, still in his dented exosuit, sipping the last of his warm, dusty beer. She shook her head, a half-smile curling on her lips. You just ended an interstellar war with 6 words. Will chuckled, raising his can. Guess they finally learned to fear the madness.